Walker from the Yoga Ranger Studio, and today's tutorial is a yin pose tutorial on deer pose and giraffe pose. So these poses to me are very closely related, but a lot of people don't use them very much, and I think it's because it includes rotation both outward and inward at the same time, which I think is a great benefit, but some people do not. So we're going to start with a couple of props, a blanket underneath to protect the outside of your leg or knee, and also something to prop you up. And I really suggest that a blanket or a towel to prop you up in these poses comes in handy just because it helps you level your hips off a little bit. So starting in butterfly pose, big feet, big toes together, you're going to take that right knee out to the right. So this will depend a lot about how far you can go, will depend a lot on how your hips are. So if you can take that knee back further, some people can find that they take it really, really wide. Some people find it's more up here. And that's okay, you're still getting the benefit of the pose. I like to flex my toes a little bit because it takes some of the pressure off of the top of my foot. One hand inside, one hand outside, sitting up nice and tall. So I use this outside hand to sort of lift me back into the middle. I find a lot of people tend to kind of lean over in this pose, and you really want to feel some stretch in the front and that one that's rotated in. So you get a lot of emphasis on this inside of the thigh, inside of the groin, inside of the leg on the other side too. Now some people have suggested don't hold this very long because it's difficult to hold and really kind of let everything go. But I find that with practice, this pose can really be held longer and longer. So start with a minute, move yourself up. I find a lot of comfort and grounding in holding it 4 or 5 minutes at a time. You will kind of have shoulder pressing up into there. You can always use a block or something to kind of prop you up as well. But great pose, and as time goes by, maybe you find you go a little bit further back. So I'm going to start with just the two poses and we're going to do the variations. I've kind of added giraffe into my yin practice by pulling this knee in. So this allows me to drop this leg down, gets a little bit more of this inside curve, and it takes some of the compression out of the hip flexor for me. Not everybody will feel that way. I find that in this pose, because I have my foot closer, I can do a few more variations. I can do a forward fold and come all the way down onto my forearms, which is going to get deeper into this both left and right thighs. I can lean back. I can also come all the way down onto elbows, although I didn't give myself enough room here. So if you want to come down a little further, you can come back. Kind of a variation of hero pose or saddle. I can also take a side lying position, walking that hand out. Nice big stretch along the side waist. Hand up overhead, behind you, or wherever it feels good for you. Take it on both sides if you want to, or just one. You're going to get both sides anyway because you're going to be doing both sides of this. Once again, arm behind you or overhead for a nice side body stretch. This is going to get a little bit deeper into the hip itself and some of the psoas, the lower back. You can also take a little twist. Take your hands over to the side and twist into your outwardly rotated knee. You can also take that twist a little bit further by pulling your leg back a little bit more, walking your hands over. Your hip's going to lift a little bit off of that blanket. You can start to twist, twist, twist. You can come down, but keep that hip a little bit further. So as soon as I do that, my hip lifts quite a bit. So I stay up a little bit more. If you want to come back further, you can do the full twist and come back. Both of those are variations for either deer pose or your giraffe pose. So I like to keep my hands centered on the floor just to give me that space where I'm seated right in the middle. I think that's probably the most important thing and the hardest thing to remember about this pose is to try to keep the hips closer to the ground, and you can use the blanket to sort of prop that up, not go too deep into the pose so that you sort of lose that grounding feeling in the hip. And also just try to keep your body in the center. So keeping your torso in the center versus leaning off to the side, unless you're doing the side bend version of it. Then again, you would definitely be leaning off to the side. Find yourself a little bit of a good stretch for both the inside and outside. I always tell people about a certain portion of the population, I usually say about half, around half, are really comfortable with what we call outward rotation, and this is an outward rotation. About 50% of the population or so are very comfortable, this would be me, with an inward rotation. Okay, so this is, the knee is rotated in instead. This is more comfortable for me, so I'm part of that population. A very, very small percentage, they say somewhere between 1 and 3%, are equally comfortable with both rotations. So this says a lot about where your hip is, about your bone structure, how the leg bone sits in the socket and how open the socket is. So for those people, they have opening, a nice big round opening that goes both ways. It's sort of like a wide versus a narrowing versus, you'll look at certain C shapes here. So for me, it looks more like this. So for me to rotate in is very easy. For rotating out, a lot of people have that open. For both, they have almost a flat curve in. So the bone just kind of can rotate both directions, just because you needed to know more anatomy in your life, right? So I hope this helps you get a little bit more comfort. If bending your knee is a problem in either one of those poses, you can always take a strap folded up or a small hand towel, roll it up, and tuck it behind the knee before you get into this pose. So if you're going to rotate in this pose, you can take something behind this knee and roll it back. It's going to give you a little bit of space there. If you have a lot of knee issues, you can keep and just don't take giraffe pose because it's going to put a lot of compression on the knee. Or you can take something behind that knee and keep a little space there. Just like a rolled towel is going to give you just a little tiny bit of space behind that kneecap, which will relieve some of the pressure behind the knee. Just lifting up to the middle, feeling yourself comfortable. If you don't need the blanket, you don't have to use it. Over time, you will probably be able to settle your hips and your sit bones firmly on the floor. But at the start, it's always good to have that prop ready just in case it is more comfortable or feels more secure for you. So this is a very grounding poses, both giraffe and our deer pose. And I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like and comment down below, and please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear back from you about what you think about these yin tutorials, to give you some ideas on options and alternatives to how you can do these poses for you. I may not always prompt all these alternatives in an online class, but feel free always to take something that will make you feel good or that will feel good for you. So sometimes when I hold a pose like deer pose for 3 or 4 minutes or giraffe pose, feel free to take 30 seconds to a minute on each side and find what feels good for you and works for you and will help you feel better and more comfortable in your practice. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.